Last week was the most heated it's been on the Northern Beaches since the Battle of Brookvale back in 2011, and the reason behind it was that the Northern Beaches Council voted to increase rates by nearly 40% over the next 3 years. 4 options are put on the table to the council. These are 1. To reduce services, 2. Maintain services, 3. Improve services, and 4. Increase services. The first option is the base case and what would have taken place without a special rate variation. This would have seen a cumulative increase of 10.7% over 3 years. Option 3 is what the council voted for and will see a cumulative 39.6% increase over the period. Local government finances seem to be having a moment, and after my video on North Sydney Council, I had a number of people reach out to suggest I take a look at Northern Beaches. And being the numbers nerd that I am, here we are. The focus of this video is a little different as there isn't the lightning rod of a major infrastructure asset going over budget and over time. That being said, this proposal still needs to be confirmed by the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal, that's a mouthful, or IPART, and they do provide an opportunity for feedback on council applications. You can find more at www.ipart.newsouthwales.gov.au. Before going on, and for transparency, family members of mine are ratepayers of Northern Beaches Council, so any increase in rates will have a direct impact on them. I'm going to be looking at 2 things relating to the council. The first is to look at the financial performance benchmarks, both historical and forecast. The second relates to what the key financial differences are between the base case, option 1, and the council preference, option 3. To do this, I used a long-term financial plan, LTFP, published in January 2025, as well as council annual reports. There's a lot of data in all of these documents, which I found interesting to read, but also completely understand it's not everyone's cup of tea. So I'll try to keep it as succinct as I can, but for anyone who is interested, happy to discuss the analysis more fully. The Office of Local Government specify financial performance measures for local councils. There are 9 measures with benchmarks, and since the amalgamation, Northern Beaches have met 65 of the 72 benchmarks over those 8 years. Since the main COVID years in 2020 and 2021, the only ones missed were in 2024. Specifically, the Building and Infrastructure Renewals Ratio and Asset Maintenance Ratio. So on the face of it, they're going pretty well. The LTFP provides forecasts for these benchmarks through to 2034. I'll focus on the forecasts for option 1 because the concern council has is what happens if additional funds aren't raised. In this scenario, of the 9 performance measures, 3 are of concern. The first is the operating performance ratio, which drops from an average of 4.34% over the last 3 years to go negative in 7 of the next 10. The Building and Infrastructure Renewals Ratio, which drops under the benchmark of 100% in 9 of the next 10 years. And finally, the Asset Maintenance Ratio, which drops under the benchmark of 100% in all of the next 10 years. Now, it is worth unpacking what these measures are, as the devil is in the detail, so let's have a look. The operating performance ratio calculation definition is operating revenue excluding capital grants and contributions less operating expenses, so in a way you're sort of operating surplus, divided by operating revenue excluding capital grants and contributions. What's interesting here are the different revenue growth expectations. To give you a good sense of it, I've separated operating revenue excluding capital grants and contributions into 2 parts: rates and annual charges and everything else. In the base case, rates and annual charges, and remember this is the base case, are expected to increase from $246 million in 2024 to $343 million in 2034. This is a 39.3% increase. Everything else increases from $166 million to $186 million, which is a 12.1% increase. So the other revenue seems to be viewed much more conservatively by the council. Second, the Building and Infrastructure Renewals Ratio. This is asset renewals divided by depreciation of building and infrastructure assets. Given the nature of accounting and local government, the depreciation expense each year will increase over time at a fairly stable rate. So to keep meeting the benchmark, asset renewals also need to increase fairly consistently over time. The reason why this figure missed the benchmark in 2024 is because the asset renewal figure of $33.5 million was the lowest it's been since 2018. Why? Not sure. But the ability to fund renewals into the future may be constrained if revenue growth, especially that outside of rates, is as low as expected. And finally, the asset maintenance ratio. This is the actual maintenance divided by required asset maintenance. In 2024, the actual maintenance spend was $49.5 million, the highest it has ever been. What seemed to be behind missing the benchmark in 2024 is that required maintenance jumped significantly from $43.2 million in 2023 to $50.5 million in 2024. Whilst there is likely to be an inflationary aspect to this increase, it is relevant to note that the assessed quality of infrastructure assets declined over this same period. The proportion of total infrastructure assets rated level 1, the highest, to level 5, the lowest, in order, is 17.8%, 52.3%, 27.2%, 2.5%, and 0.2%. This has changed from the prior year when 29.3% of assets were rated level 1, so a much higher amount, 51.3% level 2, 16.7% level 3, 2.3% level 4, and 0.4% level 5. The biggest individual infrastructure asset to change quality was roads, where in 2023, 80.9% of road assets were rated level 2 or above. In 2024, only 51.5% were. I do wonder if this relates to note C1.6 in the 2024 annual report, that the $55 million fair value reduction to roads and footpaths is due to a new assessment methodology. If there is an actual reduction in the quality of infrastructure assets, then not only does this mean that there could be an increased need for renewals, but also maintenance. And the ability to fund this maintenance going forward could well be constrained if revenues are as low as expected. To finish off with, I'm going to compare the council-approved changes with the base case. Given the nature of the changes, I thought the best way to do this was to look at the comparative cash flows provided in the long-term financial plan. The figures I'm using are the aggregate differences over the 9-year period starting the 1st of July 2025, which is when the changes would come into effect. In terms of cash inflows, 1. Rates and annual charges are higher under option 3 by a total of $488 million. Other receipts under option 3 are higher by $54 million, and interest received is higher under option 3 by $11 million. In terms of the cash outflows, payments for infrastructure, property, plant, and equipment is higher under option 3 by $339 million. Payments for materials and services is higher under option 3 by $177 million, and payments for investment purchases are higher under option 3 by $26 million. So about 2/3 of the total additional cash brought in over the next 9 years, and this is primarily through the rates increase, about 2/3 of that will go to additional payments for infrastructure, and roughly 1/3 of that will go to paying additional amounts for general services. To put the amounts in context, over that same period of time, in the base case, $2.7 billion will be raised in rates, $1.9 billion would have been spent on materials and services, and $674 million would be spent on infrastructure, property, plant, and equipment. This means the approved increase in rates is about an 18% increase over the period, allowing for a 9% increase in spending on materials and services and a 50% increase in spend on infrastructure. This is a contentious issue. There are significant cost of living pressures for many Australians at the moment, and having an increase in council rates does add to that. However, councils are also being affected by increases in prices of services and materials and have constraints on how and where they can increase revenues. Anyway, my 2 cents on the Northern Beaches special rate variation proposal. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts on what the Northern Beaches Council are doing here. So please leave your comments. Please leave your comments below. Is a rate variation the only path forward? Are the forecast estimates too conservative? Have the roads really gotten that bad? Don't forget that the iPod consultation will be opening shortly. Cheers.